He was known by many names: the Gray Man, the Brooklyn Vampire, the Boogeyman. But his real name was Albert Fish, and his crimes were so horrifying, so depraved, that even hardened detectives struggled to stomach the details. In the dark corners of early 20th century America, Fish preyed on the most innocent, children, and left behind a legacy of terror that still echoes in the annals of true crime history. This is not a story for the faint of heart. It's a chilling descent into the mind of one of the most sadistic killers the world has ever known. This is the story of Albert Fish. Hamilton Howard Albert Fish was born on May 19, 1870, in Washington, D.C. His early life was marked by instability and dysfunction from the very beginning. His father, Randall Fish, was 75 years old at the time of Albert's birth, decades older than his mother, Ellen. When Albert was only 5 years old, his father died of a heart attack, leaving the family in poverty. Unable to support her children, Ellen placed Albert in St. John's Orphanage, a harsh institution where children were regularly beaten and humiliated. It was here that Albert's psychological trauma took root. He later claimed he began to enjoy the pain, associating it with feelings of comfort and attention. These early experiences left a lasting imprint on Fish's mind. Over time, his understanding of pain and emotion became increasingly distorted. As he grew older, he began to show troubling signs, behaviors that hinted at deeper psychological issues brewing beneath the surface. Rather than developing empathy or emotional resilience, Fish seemed to retreat inward, drawn to disturbing ideas and fixated on themes of suffering. He became fascinated by newspaper articles detailing violent crimes, often saving and collecting them. What most found horrifying, Fish found strangely captivating. The boundary between fantasy and reality began to blur. His thoughts became darker, more obsessive, and increasingly detached from conventional morality. Albert Fish wasn't merely shaped by trauma. He was slowly being consumed by it. The pain he had once endured as a child had begun to mutate into something far more dangerous. And while the world remained unaware, something monstrous was quietly taking form. After leaving the orphanage and entering adulthood, Albert Fish tried to lead what appeared to be a conventional life. He moved to New York City, took odd jobs as a painter and handyman, and in 1898, he married a woman with whom he would have 6 children. To neighbors and acquaintances, Fish seemed quiet and unremarkable, a slender, aging man supporting a large family. But beneath that ordinary exterior, his mind was unraveling. He began hearing voices. Some, he claimed, were from God. Others, from long-dead saints commanding him to inflict pain. As the years passed, Fish's mental instability deepened. He began frequenting public baths, not just to bathe, but to watch young boys undress. He also developed a pattern of responding to classified ads sent by families looking to hire workers, and used these ads to insert himself into the lives of unsuspecting victims. By the 1910s and 1920s, there were increasing reports of children disappearing under mysterious circumstances, often after being seen with an elderly man matching Fish's description. While there was no hard evidence tying him to these early incidents at the time, many would later be re-examined after his arrest. Fish also began showing signs of compulsive behavior. He traveled between states, often changing his name, and sought out opportunities to satisfy his growing obsessions. He kept notes on his fantasies, some of which were later recovered and revealed deeply disturbing intentions. His own children would later recall strange and frightening behaviors, like him urging them to play games that involved pain, or disappearing for days without explanation. Though they didn't understand it then, they were living under the roof of a man who was slowly becoming one of the most sadistic criminals in American history. Still, Fish managed to stay under the radar. Law enforcement at the time had no way of connecting the dots. Serial killers weren't even a recognized concept yet, and Fish was, in many ways, the perfect predator, unnoticed, unsuspected, and already preparing for something far worse. It was May 1928 when Albert Fish, now in his late 50s, stumbled upon a classified ad in the New York World newspaper. A young man named Edward Budd was looking for work, preferably something physical, like farming. To most readers, it was just another job-seeking post. But for Fish, it was an opportunity. He responded to the ad under the name Frank Howard, claiming to be a wealthy farmer from Farmingdale, New York. He said he needed help on his estate and offered Edward a good wage. Fish dressed the part, polite, soft-spoken, even grandfatherly. And when he visited the Budd family's modest Manhattan apartment, he made a lasting impression. But he didn't come for Edward. The moment he laid eyes on 10-year-old Grace Budd, he changed his plan. Over the next few days, Fish kept in contact with the family. Then, on June 3, 1928, he arrived again, this time with a new story. He told them he was attending a birthday party for his niece and wanted to bring Grace along. Her parents were hesitant, but Fish's demeanor disarmed them. He was an old man, harmless. Grace Budd walked out the door with Albert Fish. She was never seen alive again. The family waited, hour after hour. Panic set in. Police were called. But Frank Howard had vanished without a trace. The name was fake. The farm didn't exist, and Grace was gone. What followed was a media frenzy. Posters, headlines, and interviews dominated New York papers. The Budd family was shattered, and for 6 long years, there were no answers. No one could have imagined the truth, that the man who took Grace had a history of darkness stretching back decades. And when that truth finally surfaced, it came in the form of a letter. A letter so horrifying, so unthinkable, that it would haunt the Budd family forever, and finally unmask America's quietest monster. And finally, that horrifying letter arrived. The Budd family opened it with trembling hands, only to find a confession that would shatter their world forever. Written in shaky handwriting, the letter came from Albert Fish himself. It detailed in disturbing, yet strangely dispassionate terms, what had happened to Grace. While much of the letter is too graphic to share, some excerpts reveal the twisted mind behind the crimes. Fish referred to himself as the Werewolf of Wysteria, and wrote with a chilling calmness about acts that shocked even seasoned investigators. He wrote, "I have suffered many strange things, but none so strange as what I did to that little girl." And in a passage that sent chills through the police, he confessed, "I loved that little girl like a daughter, and I ate her like a rabbit. The letter also described in unsettling detail how he had gained the Budd family's trust. Using a false name, a fabricated story, and a gentle demeanor to hide his dark intentions. Police experts pored over the letter, matching handwriting samples and piecing together clues that finally led them to Albert Fish. The public was gripped by fear and disbelief. How could such evil hide in plain sight, disguised as an old man? This letter wasn't just a confession. It was a doorway into a nightmare. One that would lead to Fish's arrest and the shocking trial that followed. Next, we'll explore the dramatic capture of Albert Fish and the courtroom moments that stunned a nation. After the harrowing letter reached the Budd family, detectives worked tirelessly to trace its origins. It didn't take long. The careful phrasing, the handwriting, the familiarity with the victim, it all pointed to one man, Albert Fish. He was living in a modest boarding house in Manhattan when police knocked on his door. He didn't resist. In fact, he seemed almost relieved, as if the game was over. Fish carried with him a Bible, scraps of paper and clippings, evidence of a long obsession with crime, control, and suffering. What followed was not a frantic manhunt, but a quiet unraveling. Piece by piece, investigators assembled the truth. Aliases, victims, confessions, and chilling admissions that went beyond Grace Budd. When the trial began in March of 1935, the courtroom wasn't just filled with reporters and attorneys. It was filled with a public desperate for understanding, for answers that would never fully come. Fish sat calmly through testimony after testimony, sometimes speaking in riddles, sometimes smiling faintly as horrific details were read aloud. The defense leaned heavily on insanity. They spoke of hallucinations, childhood trauma, and severe mental illness. The prosecution, however, argued intent. Fish, they said, knew exactly what he was doing. After 10 days of testimony and intense deliberation, the jury found him guilty. The judge sentenced him to death. On January 16, 1936, Albert Fish was executed at Sing Sing prison. Witnesses say he walked to the chair without fear. Some might say justice was served. But for the families left behind, and for a country coming to terms with the unimaginable, the story of Albert Fish left scars that no verdict could erase. His crimes may be buried in old newspaper clippings and case files, but the legacy he left behind is a quiet warning. Sometimes, the most dangerous monsters are the ones no one sees coming. Thanks for watching. I know it's been a while, over a year actually. And I just want to say a genuine thank you to everyone who's still here, still subscribed, or just discovering the channel. Life threw some unexpected stuff my way, and I had to step back for a while. But I've missed this. The research, the storytelling, and most of all, this community. So, we're back. And we're diving deeper than ever. If this story gave you chills, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss what's coming next. And hey, let me know in the comments, which case should we cover in the next episode? I am Alex, and this is Conundrum. Stay curious and stay safe.